A while back I made this video that went over the #1 thing that bothered me about using the HOLLEY EFI software. As a result of that, a couple of things happened. One, our most recent software update actually included a fix for this problem, which was amazing. And two, probably about a half an hour after posting that video, I got a phone call and it was HOLLEY. Naturally, I expect worst case scenario in every situation, so I figured they were going to bitch me out or complain or whatever, but it went the exact opposite way. They were curious to know what other things I thought that the software could use. In today's world, everybody is overworked and underpaid and nobody has time for anything. So even though we scheduled a couple of phone call sessions to kind of go over it all, everyone was busy and it just sort of never happened. And ultimately, I think a lot of this stuff would probably be better explained in a video format. Since HOLLEY actually listened and made an update with the recommendation that I was after, I figured I would do them a favor and give them 146 more things that they could update with all their free time. Now, I'm not saying that I'm solely responsible for that software update taking place, but it is proof that HOLLEY watches this stuff and takes notes. So if anything in this video is an update that you would like to see, if you comment below, it might be helpful. If 500 people all comment asking to see the same thing, they'll be far more likely to actually make those adjustments rather than if 2 people comment and it seems like nobody cares. Why are they beating the fuck out of everything over there? And to be clear, this is about simple software updates more so than features, functionality. That could be a video for a different day. If you are looking for the ECU to be able to tickle your nuts while you push the cruise control buttons in your Lamborghini, that's not the target audience for HOLLEY products, so that type of stuff's probably not going to happen. So with that being said, I think we should start off by addressing the elephant in the room. This is $450, I believe, somewhere around there. This is from a 1992 Honda Civic. It's the same 1992 Honda Civic that came with an AM/FM radio. And a cassette player was an upgrade. So if this combination is able to test outputs, we know that HOLLEY is capable of doing so. That would be a really nice added feature. My assumption is that they do not have this feature because they don't want people to blow themselves up. I can just see it now. Somebody goes to test an injector output, cell phone rings, they walk away from the car, come back, forget about it, try and start it up, and they shoot the rod through the wall in the garage and smack their wife in the face with it. Oh yeah! So there's a little bit of safety precaution there. I do think there is some safety measures that they could take that would eliminate a little bit of that, but for the sake of making this short and simple, adding the ability to test outputs would be very beneficial. A lot of outputs you can test depending on what it is, just using engine RPM, throttle position, things of that nature. But if we're going from a safety standpoint, if you're not going to let me turn injectors and coils and things of that nature on, it would almost be equally as beneficial as if we could have a test mode where I could turn those things off. Being able to turn injectors off individually is a huge time saver, and I think that would be a great addition to the software.
Felt good, man. Felt good. And I felt like peeing on the floor or something.
First attempt at cutting this video down and editing it, it ended up being 45 minutes long. Nobody wants to listen to me run my mouth for that long.
Also, like back when Shakespeare was writing plays,
So we're gonna cut a whole bunch out of this and maybe we'll have a part 2. The next one everyone's been asking about for a long time, we'll kind of cover 2 things at once here, would be having Lambda as one of our fuel types here. I get it, here in America, it seems like not a lot of people are using Lambda, but the ones that are familiar with it really simplify their life in a lot of situations. So just simply adding it would be pretty beneficial. But there is something in the software that I think is borderline dangerous. That would be, I would like to think, a relatively easy fix. So if we choose gasoline as our fuel type, and we go to target air fuel ratio, you can see all of our target air fuel ratios in the gasoline scale. Now, if we go back and we change our fuel type to, let's say, methanol, we go back to our target air fuel ratio table, our values here are still on the gasoline scale, which is not even going to run the car on that big of a difference. So when you switch the fuel types, I feel that the target air fuel ratio table should update itself. The next thing we have, I would like to see added, would be an overall fuel trim adjustment. It feels like a majority of the ECUs that I've used over the years have an overall fuel trim of some sort, even though some systems like AEM name it something ridiculously stupid, like microbit per second or something obnoxious. But ultimately, this becomes a huge help, especially like just say for an 85 car, for example. You can keep all of your settings and stuff the same without having to trash your fuel tables, especially if you're dealing with like volumetric efficiency. You can just, just bang 30% into the whole thing, all just in one spot. It makes it really nice. So what you sort of can do to offset that a little bit is you can manipulate the injector flow data. So if the car has 120 pound injectors in it, and let's say you set it to 95 to backdoor your overall fuel trim, the unfortunate reality is at one point in time, you are going to get a phone call from the customer totally freaking the hell out. We're gonna die! So a lot of that could be avoided just by simply having right here like an overall fuel trim. So while we're talking about fuel, if we go to our fuel table here, you can see we can view it volumetric efficiency, and then we have this checkbox for conversion to go into fuel flow. I think what would be pretty cool is if there was an additional checkbox that would show you injector duty cycle. So if you're not familiar with this, if we highlight the whole table, let's just make an extreme example out of this, which is at 120 everywhere. You'll see that our cells up here turn white. That means that we're over 100% injector duty cycle. So what would be cool is if we had another checkbox that would actually show us our injector duty cycle beforehand. So, if you get to the top of the table, you're not quite at 100% yet. Well, then once you start making your fueling adjustments, you do go over 100%. If you could just see what the duty cycle is going to be before you get to that point, it would be helpful. You can see this system here. We put our mouse, it shows estimated duty cycle. So that's super helpful. And then while we're at it, what would be really beneficial, especially for the guys switching from another system over to Holley, if your car has already been tuned on a system that has just raw injector pulse width like this in milliseconds, if we're able to have another checkbox to be able to view raw millisecond, then you could take your existing file from your old software and then place it roughly into your Holley system, and it's just going to make it life that much easier for a lot of people.
Cut to black. Audience goes fucking apeshit.
We'll just try and get ahead of it on this one. I am sure people are going to comment that they want to see an NTK sensor as an option with the Terminator X and the Sniper. The reality of it is you need to buy HP or a Dominator for that. The Terminator X is not just a Dominator for less money. It is a lower end ECU, and there are going to be sacrifices associated with that. So that's a really big change to ask for. So I would say that, again, this is more about software updates, not hardware. Okay, this next one's probably gonna make me seem lazy. That's not the case. I think sometimes it's forgotten about that when you're sitting in an office and you have two monitors and you have a mouse, things are a lot different than when you're sitting around in a car at the racetrack and there's sun glare everywhere, or you're sitting on the back of a boat about to get thrown out of it. Sometimes small things can make a big difference in those scenarios. So if we go to HP Tuner software here, you can see we have our axes up here, and then we have this empty box. If we click on this empty box, it actually highlights the whole table. And believe it or not, that makes a huge difference in saving time, especially when you're viewing something dual pane like this, and you can only get to about half the table. So if you want to click and drag, and then you can't even see what you're doing. If we could just simply click on that corner to highlight the whole thing, that would be awesome. And then probably even more beneficial than that, if we go into this software, if we click on the RPM that we want to adjust, it highlights all of it. And if we click on the load point that we want to adjust, it highlights all of it. Okay, this one's always kind of irritated me a little bit as well. We have our axes and they're blue. They look like they're already highlighted. So when you actually highlight them like this, you can't see it. So if these were literally any color other than blue, when we highlighted them, we'd be able to see it. All right, the next one I think would be an easy update and would go a long way. Apparently, a lot of people don't know that you can change the temperature in which the closed loop starts. And everybody has theirs set to 0, wonder why the car cold starts like crap when the sensor's not even working yet and it's trying to use it. So I use this on basically every car. However, I would also like to have a time-based enablement. So if I don't want the closed loop to kick on for 3 minutes or something like that, then that would be huge. If you do enough of these cars, you'll see that one car, the sensor might warm up in 10 or 15 seconds, but then the next one, it might not warm up for a minute and a half. And situationally, that can cause problems. So when the car is cold, the temperature-based correction works just fine and does what you need it to do. However, when the car is 200 degrees and you're starting it up and it's trying to make fuel corrections based off of a sensor that's not warmed up all the way, it can be very problematic. So adding a timer would be great. And the timer already exists. So if you go to data log, you can see this RTC, I'm assuming is for runtime counter, but as we click throughout the log, you can see that it progressively goes up. So that timer basically starts once you fire the engine up and goes, till whenever. But so if we could take the first 30 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever it is, and turn closed loop off based off of that, that would be awesome. Okay, on this one we're going to touch a couple of things at the same time. So if we're in the HP and Dominator software, we have the ability to check on and off this large table, which brings us down to a much more manageable table. In Terminator X, now maybe I'm wrong on saying this, but most of the HP and Dominator cars are on your 3-4 multi-thousand horsepower deals, and we have the ability to use this little tiny table. However, with the Terminator X Sniper, a lot of these guys are making 300 horsepower. You don't need 647,000 data points with this large table. Having the ability to have the small table on the Sniper and the Terminator X would be awesome. And if we want to take it a step further, if you've ever changed map sensors on a turbo car, go from a 2.5 bar to a 5 bar, it can be a real pain in the butt because you got to copy and paste and change everything, and it just kind of sucks. So what would be cool is if we could either define how many data points we want, or the way that this system here does it is actually kind of cool. So this is our naturally aspirated configuration. So if we wanted to add boost to this, we go to options, show boost tables. It just adds what we need for it. And then if we wanted to go to a 4 bar, it just adds that many more data points. If we want to go to a 5 bar, as you can guess, it added all of those data points. So essentially, I just went from a 1 bar map sensor to a 5 bar map sensor and didn't have to do anything. Now granted, if this wasn't a pre-populated tune file, this wouldn't have followed quite this way, but being able to just simply add to your existing tune rather than having to go back and reconfigure all of it is astronomical help. So if somebody comes in with this system and wants to switch from a 3 bar to a 5 bar, it's just like a 2-minute process, as where with the current configuration in Holley, if somebody wants to switch from a 3 bar to a 5 bar, it borderline feels like you're starting all over again. Obviously that's a little bit dramatic and it's not quite the case, but it's definitely far more tedious to do it this way than how to do it, just by simply adding additional cells and columns and rows, whatever the hell you want to call it. Okay, this one is just me being over dramatic and easily annoyed. So if we go to our fuel graph, and let's say I want to view it like this for whatever reason. Now I say I want to go, I don't remember how much timing I have in it, so I want to go and look at that. Okay, that looks great. Now I want to go back to my fuel graph. It's back to the way that it was. So if we could have like a checkbox somewhere, like I guess rather than conversion, if we could have a checkbox up here to hold the position. So if each time I come back to look at the fuel graph, I hate having to drag the thing all around. It just it eats up a bunch of time, and I feel like that could be just something, you know, check a box, it holds its place, and all problems go away. All right, next we are in a data log. I have no idea what this file is, doesn't really matter. So if we open up a comparison file, God damn it. All right, so I don't really know what either of these files are. They don't match up. That's not the purpose. So basically we can overlay two run files on top of each other, which is awesome. Anytime a system doesn't have the ability to overlay at least two run files on it, it just really feels like a missed opportunity. So naturally we all want to be greedy, and my recommendation here would be able to add more than two files on top of each other. It can make troubleshooting significantly easier, and racetrack stuff, being able to, you know, take 5 different runs or whatever it is and piece it all together, it can kind of help benefit a lot. So probably more important to me than being able to overlay that many runs on top of each other. Again, I'm grateful to have two, but what annoys me is, you probably noticed I like checkboxes a lot. I think if we had a checkbox to toggle the comparison file off and on would be awesome. Sometimes it just gets, there's all kinds of stuff and it just gets a little kind of clumsy to look at. So if we could click off the comparison, analyze the data, and then click the data back on, I think that would just be a big time saver. So while we're in a data log, if we go to File, we go to Properties, we have this section for notes. Maybe this exists, I don't know, I've never seen it in here, but I feel like it would be very beneficial to have a notes section within the actual tune file as well. I think it's probably pretty obvious as to how that would be helpful. Like this computer probably has several hundred HOLLEY files on it. I have a different folder for each customer. Each customer generally would have, throughout a tuning session, have, I don't know, 5, 10 different global files. And then for the guys that are going to the racetrack, then, you know, that gets amplified, you know, by 1,000,000% more. Sometimes it just kind of all blends together. So if we could have a note section, go in and be able to differentiate quickly and easily with notes. Obviously you can overlay and you can compare files and you can do it that way, but a note section would be super helpful, I think. Okay, so the next one, we go toolbox, add individual configuration. We really should just have a flex fuel ICF at this point in time. So you can do all of the same stuff with the advanced tables. The warning tells you about to blow yourself up. We got 1D, we got 2D, but there's really kind of no point, I don't think, to eat up 2, 3, 4 different custom tables just for something that could easily be added to an ICF. The custom tables that everybody's doing is basically going to be the same. You know, you're going to add fuel, you're probably going to add some timing, you might add some boost, and you might change your target air fuel ratio, and maybe you're going to do some different startup things. But ultimately, if we had a flex fuel ICF, I think that would be awesome. While we're on the topic of additional ICFs, I think an engine health ICF would be hugely beneficial. So the backdoor method now currently is to have the boost ICF and configuring some different stuff based off of this. But if you're new to HOLLEY, you've never used HOLLEY, why in the world would you think to go to boost control to add an engine safety for your oil pressure or your fuel pressure? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think one of our options here should actually be fuel pressure differential as well. I think that could go a long way. And then just doing it in a normal fashion. You know, I think that there's certain things that are common enough that you shouldn't have to engineer and create shit to make it happen. Like just put it there. This is our idle control tab, and this is really all that we have for adjustability. So without going any deeper into it, I'm just gonna say we need a whole lot more adjustability. If this works okay on a car, that everything is working okay, but when you get in one of those situational deals where this isn't enough control, then you would just like to have way more. Again, I get it, I understand it. This system is typically designed to be pretty user-friendly. And even though there's like 5 or 6 things here, it seems that people still struggle to get it right. So adding more complexity to it, it's a double-edged sword. It's gonna fix some scenarios for guys that have a good grasp on how this works, and then it's going to ultimately confuse the people that are struggling with what's currently here. Okay, next one is when we go to our custom tables. This advanced enable is one of my favorite things that we have in here. However, I want like 5 more conditions that I can meet. So, you know, we have in our advanced enable, give me like 3, 4, 5 checkboxes to add additional things. That would be a huge benefit to me, as a lot of times I find myself having to make 2 or 3 custom tables to essentially do one thing just because I want to turn it on and off at different times and different points and different scenarios. So if we go to data log, set up ECU logging. This is only HP and Dominator. As Sniper, Terminator X don't have internal logging. So we can put our start method to triggered, logging rate, but basically our input trigger. So in this case situation, let's say we wanted to start logging at anything over 3,000 RPM. The concept of this is perfect. I just want it to work better. It seems that there's just a huge delay in it, and even having a couple of other situations would be nice. I don't necessarily feel that we need to set up a custom output to trigger it and configure it and all that. Like, it should just all be done in one place. This is one of those things that there's no reason to need to do anything custom to start your data log. You know, we got trans brake inputs, throttle positions, manifold pressures, wheel speed, drive shaft speed, whatever. But if we could just, in this one scenario, be able to put TPS and RPM are greater than XYZ, and it would start immediately without any delay. The biggest gripe I have with this isn't necessarily on my end, but the problem becomes when you're trying to walk somebody through this over the phone. If you could just tell them, like, in this one place, or make one simple video and here's how you do it, that would be great. But when we're dealing with custom outputs and custom tables, it just is more complicated than it needs to be. So if we could just make this work a little bit better, maybe add 1 or 2 more trigger points, that would be great. The next thing, which would probably be a huge undertaking, but everybody's asked about it, is having a standalone software for the HOLLEY dashes. If we could just configure everything sitting in the living room and then go and load it into the car, that would be a huge help. Sitting there trying to configure a dash when your car's in the garage, it's 140 degrees.
I'm sweaty. We're up. I'm a butt crack and my balls and everywhere.
And you gotta climb over a roll cage 300 times to do it. Kind of gets old. So I think that would be an awesome update. All right, this one here drives me absolutely bonkers. So let's say we connect to our ECU. And we drive around for a while, blah, 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 blah. And we shut the car off. And since everybody's battery dies within 7 seconds of leaving the key on, we leave the key off, we start digging through our data log, we're looking at everything, seeing what's going on, going back and forth, making our changes. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it generally will blast us out of whatever we were just looking at, and it comes up with this error warning. Make this go away. Again, even if it's a toggle type of a thing in our preferences up here, if we could just turn this thing off, that'll drive me nuts. But it's like a constant battle of leaving the key on so that thing doesn't piss you off, versus having the battery die 120 times versus throughout one dyna session. So we have these other things, warnings that we can turn off. I really wish we could turn that one off. All right, I think that's more than enough for this video. As always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.